Welcome back to Kerbal Space Program Career Mode playthrough. In the last episode, we finished up a few lingering contracts we had sitting around for contracts that we just never completed for one reason or another. And we're completely clear on active contracts now, so we're ready to pick up something new. And I think what we want to do today is we're going to send our first probe to another planet. So we've got Start Exploring Eve here as an available contract. And that just means get into escape trajectory at Eve and recover or transmit any science data. It's important that it's recover or transmit. There's no requirement to bring the data home. There's no requirement to bring the probe home. There is this other contract here, but it requires you to land on Eve and then return to Kerbin for a probe. And we can't do that. There's no way we can do that right now. To be honest, this contract kind of annoys me because a probe, the point of a probe is you don't have to bring it home, right? When you send a crewed mission, it makes sense for the requirement to be bringing the craft home. But for a probe, there's no reason you should have to bring a probe home. That's the point of a probe, is that it's disposable. And looking at this, we actually have this little, it's a minor contract, transmit science from the space around the moon, but we can complete that right away, can't we? Because we have satellites in orbit of the moon. So let's just go do that real quick. So this is the satellite from the last episode that we had to repair one of the solar panels. Remember, this isn't originally our satellite, but apparently we own it now that we've repaired it. But at any rate, we can open this menu, and it has already done a telemetry report, but if we open info, we can do a force run, and we're not going to get any science for a forced run because we've already completed this experiment, but we will transmit it. So I'm just going to time warp until that completes. And there we go, contract complete. That was 37,000 space O's for basically nothing. Let's get back to the Space Center now. And on to our actual mission for this episode. We're going to do a first exploration of Eve and Gilly. I'm going to actually do a bit more than that contract required. That contract was just enter the sphere of influence and transmit any science. I'm going to do quite a bit more than that. But I'm hoping that we can sort of unlock the chain of contracts and do them as we go to get rewards for it. But one thing I want to unlock is it this one? Yes, this node, because it has this gravioli detector. It also has medium dish reflectors, and we might get some use out of that. So let's unlock. Okay, on the bottom here, we've got this little menu bar that looks like an alarm clock. That's oh, we have two of those, because this is stock now, isn't it? I think this is the modded alarm clock, and this is a stock one that's been added. I haven't ever used this one. Let's give it a shot, actually. So I'm looking at both of these transfer window planners, and the stock transfer window planner is telling me Kerbin to Eve is year 2, day 292, which is 413 days away. The mod transfer window planner is telling me Kerbin to Eve is year 2, day 126, which is 247 days away. That's a big discrepancy. That's a big disagreement. And since I've never used the stock one before, I'm not going to use it now. I trust this one more than I trust the stock one. So let's go with this one. And we've got our transfer window already added. So we're just going to go into the planning station because it lets us time warp faster. And we're just going to time warp 247 days. Coming up on our transfer window now, it should automatically slow time warp and stop us when we get there. And there we go. We can delete that alarm. So we are now at our Kerbin to Eve transfer window. We take a look at this, looking at the angle, that's having Eve a little ways behind Kerbin because Eve orbits faster than Kerbin. So let's head to the VAB now. And here's the vessel I've put together for this mission. Looks pretty normal from the outside. We don't have boosters. It's been a while since we've launched something without boosters. But at any rate, if we, let me just remove this fairing for a moment. Let's look inside. There is quite a bit going on in here. And I'm not going to just sit here and go through it all right now, but let's go over the broad strokes. Up top we have a relay and ScanSat mapper for Eve itself. And then here we have a relay and ScanSat mapper for Gilly. And then 3 Gilly Landers, because Gilly has 3 biomes. At least it should, unless something's changed with the mods that I've added. And then at the bottom we've got an Eve Lander. Early morning on the launch pad. I time warped us a few hours just so the sun would rise and we could see what's going on. I think we're ready to launch here. So, gravity turn, that's what I wanted. Default parameters are fine. Auto stage off, time warp on, and launch. That morning atmosphere haze is kind of cool. Never really paid attention to that before. We're almost out of fuel on this stage, so let's go ahead and open up the fairing for the next stage. And fire. Okay, now that we've got our unmentionably shaped spacecraft into a stable orbit, we can go ahead and get the solar panels out. And we need to plan our transfer to Eve. So, Eve, set as target. Now, Eve is in a lower orbit than Kerbin, which means we want to slow down our orbital velocity. And that means we want to burn against Kerbin's direction of motion. So Kerbin follows this direction of motion in orbit. That means we want to burn facing retrograde in solar orbit. So that would be somewhere like in this area, just eyeballing it. And if we do a prograde burn there, what does that do for us? Wow, that pretty much is what we need. Let's tweak the point of burn a little bit. So you'll know when AP gets right at basically where you're at, that's when you're doing it at the most efficient time. And then we can back off a little bit because we just want PE to sort of just go. The most efficient would be to just kiss Eve's line, but I'm going to let it go slightly below Eve's line. So our burn's going to be right here. And you'll notice it's still not showing us an encounter. That's because we haven't done a plane change yet. So we're going to do a mid-course correction burn somewhere around in here to account for that 2 degrees of different plane. And that's showing our rendezvous roughly here. At this point, we could tweak it in a little bit. But to be honest, we're going to tweak it anyway when we get to the mid-course correction burn part. So let's just roll with what we've got. And let's go ahead and start the burn. And let's actually adjust our nose to be pointing at the maneuver vector and not at the prograde vector, because they are slightly different. And at this point, we can tweak our mid-course correction burn to get our approach closer. There's a rendezvous. So if we switch into Eve's SOI for our point of view reference, we can tweak that in a little further. And we can play games again and trying to get PE right under. I was going to say get PE right under Gilly's orbit, but it's pretty much there already, isn't it? I think I'll just leave it. So at this point, we've got nothing to do but cruise out of Kerbin's sphere of influence. Now that we're in solar orbit or Kerbolar orbit, whatever you want to call it, let's get rid of this fairing and expose all of the science we have on board. Have we done all of the science here? Because we did send a probe out once, so this atmospheric scan's not going to do anything here. Rad scan has been done. We haven't done gravity scan, have we? Let's run that. By the way, look at time to completion there, 90 days. So Kerbalism makes experiments take time to complete, and this one takes a lot of time. Let's go ahead and open up these solar panels on the relay. Because why not? There's no reason not to at this point. And I'm going to open up these reflectors. So what reflectors do in Kerbalism is they boost the strength of your dishes. These dishes are like slightly too small to be running a mission from the orbit of Eve. They're fine for the distance we are now from Kerbin because we're really close. But when we get out to Eve, we will want to boost that signal a bit by using reflector dishes To make that work, you just need your dish pointing at the reflector, and it'll bounce the signal off. You also notice that I'm using 3 dishes and 3 reflectors because signals are combinable in Kerbalism. Now, don't quote me on this because I'm not sure this is exactly how it works, but combining antennas doesn't give you more range, but it gives you more bandwidth for the range you're at. So it'll allow us to transmit science faster. Here we are at the mid-course correction burn. 90-ish days later, a little more than 90 days, so we've finished the gravity scan by now. Transmitted that back to Kerbin. Let's point our nose at the maneuver vector and get this correction burn done. Mid-course correction burn done. This is our current trajectory, sweeping right low past Eve. I gotta admit, our delta V margin is quite a bit lower than I expected at this point. And the reason for that is I forgot we would need to do a plane change burn. That's my mistake. I just didn't even think about that. So we just spent about 300 delta V on a plane change that I wasn't planning to spend. I think we're still okay because I think I had a few hundred delta V of extra margin left in here. But the plan was to use that 400 whatever it was for our initial capture at Eve, and now I won't be able to do that. Hopefully we still have enough to do the mission. I guess we'll just roll with it and see what happens. I don't want to revert. We are just entering Eve's sphere of influence. And that should mean a whole flurry of science has started running. Yep. Milestone. Initiated the first flyby of Eve. Okay, so our contract just needs us to transmit 1 science experiment. We should have telemetry scan might be the first one to finish. While we're sitting here waiting for transmission, I can show you what I mean about the antennas. So we're currently getting 769 bytes per second transmission rate. Let's retract the reflectors. And that drops us to 706 with a 80% signal strength. It brings us back up a bit. It's still not a huge difference, but right now we're still relatively close to Kerbin because we're both on the same side of orbit. At the time when we're like completely out of phase, so Kerbin is exactly opposite of the sun from us, it'll be a bigger difference. Okay, we're just about to finish transmitting that telemetry report. And that should complete the contract. Well done. I want to mark everything for transmission again now. We don't need to be holding on to it. And at this point, I'm going to save and go back to the Space Center and look at what contracts we have available. Because if I'm right about this, we should have, yes, Orbit Eve. So let's take that and fly by Gilly. Let's take that. So how much delta V would it take now to just like barely capture? Just barely capture. 280. That's more than we have in these tanks. That's a little disappointing, to be honest. Because I was hoping to leave the overall carrier in Eve orbit. But it looks like we won't be able to. Let's go ahead and start magnetometer report. That needs 7 days to run. I don't think we're actually going to have enough time to complete it now. But we'll get a good chunk of it done at least. So we're rapidly approaching Eve. That's a cool looking crater with a impact feature in the middle. So what we're going to have to do here, since we don't have enough delta V to do a full capture, we're going to do what we can out of this tank. And then we're going to have to detach the 3 component parts and have them each finish the capture individually. And we're going to want to be fairly quick about that. In fact, I think it's going to be enough of an issue that I'm going to go ahead and do it now, instead of waiting until we're there. Okay, we're done with that bottom tank. So let's start with, I suppose, the main craft. Let's just go ahead and get everything detached before we get there. That'll make things go a little more quickly, more smoothly when the time comes. And last but not least, we have the Gilly carrier. Okay, I guess we'll start with the vessel we're currently controlling. I don't know why I would prefer one vessel over another here, so let's just go with what we were on. We just want to go until good enough. So we have a minimal capture. Not good enough, actually. There we go. That's good enough. Now we've got this vessel, which is the main carrier. Let's do the same for him. He is a heck of a lot more powerful than that other one. And last but not least, we've got this guy. Okay, so with you, what we probably want to do is burn a little bit of your fuel to slow down a bit into a lower orbit. We need to save some, because after we do that, we need to deorbit. Okay, now we're going to start using this alarm clock feature that's been driving me nuts for a while. Because we've got multiple probes we want to control. Oh god, don't do that. That is exactly not what I wanted to do. Okay, we've got a maneuver node set up for that maneuver now. What even just happened? What even, game? I just want a node here. There you go. That's what I wanted. Periapsis node. Let's switch to our other two craft. We've got one here. Actually, let's name our craft while we're here. Just so it's easier to figure out which one we're switching to. Okay, who's next? You were going to want to get into a polar orbit. So that's most efficiently done at apoapsis. You go ahead and just show me the inclination that we're getting into here. That's just about perfect, 90.1. So if we can create an alarm for that node. And we've got one more craft we're trying to manage here, which is this guy. And you were trying to get into Gilly, so let's set Gilly as target. Kind of just missed that, didn't we? I guess we'll just do it on the next pass. Okay, so we've got one maneuver 21 days out, one maneuver 3 days out, and one maneuver that's only an hour out. That's clearly going to be our next vessel, so let's switch to that guy. Oh, by the way, we have completed the contract for Orbit Eve. Let's take a quick visit back to the Space Center, now that we've completed that contract, and see if anything new is unlocked. I'm hoping Land on Eve contract is unlocked now. Available, Land on Eve. Landed or splashdowns with no requirement to recover. That's important because there's no way we're recovering this. Let's accept that. Manned return from orbit. That's a good contract. We're not doing that right now, clearly, but I'm glad that it's a return from orbit, not from the surface. Okay, back to our lander, and let's time warp right in. The alarm clock should stop us so we don't overrun. I guess we're just going to burn like 100 Delta V out of the tank. I didn't really plan this very closely. Okay, 140 left in the tank. We're going to use that for our deorbit. So we'll, well, let's just put an alarm there. 1 day away. Let's do some time warping once more. Radio. So, retrograde. And we want to bring our periapsis down into probably like 60 or 50. That feels pretty low for Eve, I gotta admit, but we do have a lot of... everything's heat shielded on this thing. I think it'll be okay. 90 is the atmosphere. Let's pull it down to like 65 to be kind of safe. Eve has a really rough atmosphere for burning up. You have to be quite careful with it. So that is 1 day, 1 hour away. That's before any of our other maneuvers. We can just go ahead and ride this guy down. We'll burn as much fuel as we can until it blows up, just to slow us down a little. Oh. Oh. Oh, we're okay. I thought the whole craft exploded for a second there. It's fine. We're good. Hey, we're slowing down. We still got half of our ablator left. Cool. I really hope we're allowed to deploy the parachute without connection. I think we can. Yay, we can. Okay, the thing might run out of power before we hit the ground. But that's fine, because it'll just sit on the ground until daylight. We can't run any of the science, unfortunately, because we don't have a connection to turn the science experiments on. Or can we? Actually, can we do it through this menu? Oh, we can. How about that? Nice. Our probe core was chosen because it has a huge data capacity. So it should be able to store all the science as we travel down. So I've never been to Eve with Parallax installed. And I was really looking forward to seeing what it looks like now, but I guess we're going to have to wait for daytime. Where are we even at? In Eastern Sea. 10 meters off the surface of the sea. And a very gentle splashdown. Contract complete. We can go ahead and extend the solar panels that are built into this thing, and you also have an antenna somewhere. Can't quite remember where I put that. Oh, there it was. Where'd you go? There you are. Extend antenna. We're just gonna let this thing sit here. Oh, we have a connection with the antenna up. We did bring a seismic scan science experiment along, but that only works on land, and we're in water, so we're not going to get any value from that. The rest of our experiments are running now, though. And look at how much... we've got almost a gigabyte of data stored already. So at some point this might fill up, and if it does, it's just going to throttle our data rate. But it's fine. Eventually it'll all transfer out. It just takes a while. Let's see what we're up to next. We're 5 hours away from maneuver on this craft, so let's switch to it. This is going to be our plane change to get into a polar orbit. It's a very rumbly spacecraft. So what do we want to do with this craft? This has our scan sensor on board. And that is best between 20 and 250 kilometers of altitude. The space high boundary is 400. I would like to leave us partially in space high just because it'll run the SITE experiment, which is a space high experiment. But the ScanSat is only going to run in daylight, so we need to run it on that side of the planet. So we'll see if we can get two contradictory so we'll see if we can get those two contradictory goals up here. Okay, so if we burn out the 950 delta V in the tank, we'll have empty tanks. We'll be in this orbit, which is sort of the opposite of what I wanted. I wanted to have our lower pass on this side in daylight, and our higher pass over here. But this is the best we can do. So we're just going to leave it at that, and in half of an Eve year, when Eve is on the other side of the sun and the sun is shining from this direction, the orbit will be what I want it to be. And that's sounds kind of a naff, but it's perfectly fine actually, because we're not going to be back to Eve in the next half Eve year. So let's burn. You're currently throttled by data throughput because you have a small data storage. But like I said, you're going to be here forever. So just take your time and do what you can. We can start the ScanSat also. And last but not least, we still got this guy heading to Gilly. So your maneuver node is still 13 days away because you're on this super high, super slow orbit. And we're going to have a 3-second burn here, 22 meters per second, to get into the same plane as Gilly. You know, I'm just realizing how much delta V we have in this part of the craft. Wow, actually. Okay, so what do we got to do to get you to Gilly now? We would want to lower our apoapsis. We would want to lower our AP here. That was not bad, actually. Well, it's disappeared now, but I think that's what we want right there. It's not showing up, but I think that's what we want. Okay, we set a maneuver here now, and we should be able to pull those two things together by doing, not that, apparently. By doing this. There we go. Gilly encounter. Approaching our Gilly encounter. Gilly has a really small sphere of influence, so we're going to be pretty close before we snap in. And if I remember right, I think we're currently on a collision course, so we are going to need to adjust ourselves a bit. There we go, we just snapped in. One way you could do this is to point yourself surface retrograde. This is not something you should probably do at any other rendezvous, except maybe Paul. Paul's really light too. But if we point surface retrograde, that's basically a synchronization burn. Okay, we're running up on zeroing out our synchronization burn here. We can probably just cut the engines. We're going to time warp up to PE, and we'll do an orbit retrograde burn there. And this should pretty quickly put us into orbit around Gilly. Bada bing. Okay, we're in orbit of Gilly here. But we have a really poor data rate. We're only getting out 9.7 bytes per second. So it's going to take us a day to do a temperature scan that normally takes like, I don't know, what is it, 30 seconds? So let's just time warp for a day, I suppose. Stop that. Everything stop except for temperature scan. There we go. Contract complete for transmitting science from Gilly. Let's head back to the Space Center. Now, I think we missed out on an Orbit Gilly contract there, and the reason was because our data throughput was so throttled that we orbited before we completed transmitting that science experiment. So we just kind of skipped past that, but we have land on Gilly now. Let's accept that and head back to our craft. Okay, our central craft here is the biome scanner. Let's get it in play first. So we want to turn you into a polar orbit. That should not be challenging. Gilly has very low gravity, very low mass, so it's easy to change inclinations at Gilly. You don't have to worry about it really. If you look, I don't even have an engine on this thing. I have RCS thrusters, so we're just going to use the RCS to do what we need to do. Now let's face retrograde. I could have got this more efficiently if I'd used a maneuver node and planned it out, but I don't think it's going to be an issue here at Gilly. because you can pretty much do everything at Gilly for like 30 or 40 meters per second. This vessel Kerbal Engineer Redux tells us how much RCS delta V we have, and it's 200. Remind me, real quick. This part wants to be between 200, or between 20 and 250. So, well, we're there already, actually. We don't need to do anything else. Okay, you just hang out here, I suppose. I'm going to keep all the other experiments paused for now because I want to complete the ScanSat. There we go, complete map of Gilly. 3 biomes, just like I thought. Midlands, lowlands, and highlands. So you can turn off your scan sensor now and just turn on your other science. Do what can be done. Including the, of course, gravity scan that's going to take 90 days. And it's actually going to take quite a bit longer than that because we're going to be throttled by data throughput and not by the experiment itself. That could take years to finish, to be honest. Meanwhile, let's switch back to our carrier. And we're at the final stage of this mission, which is to land our 3 Gilly Landers. Okay, I think we're basically done with this craft at this point. We just need to get our actual landers onto the surface. So it doesn't matter which order we go in. I have no special ordering for these, so let's just pick one. Surface Retro. And let's just put you down somewhere. Low, mid, high. Let's go for... Well, Highlands are right there, you know? Now, there's one thing that's really annoying about Gilly, and that's that everything that happens really slowly. So we're going to do a lot of physical time warping here, and it's still going to take a minute, so I'm just going to probably skip you guys forward in the video a bit. This is 4x physical time warp. This is the fastest I can approach right here. We do want to kind of pick out a good landing site, don't we? Keep an eye, by the way, on our monopropellant. We don't want to run out. This looks a little bit smooth over here. Maybe let's go for over there. Contract complete. You can engage all of your science. I don't know why. You should have been engaged already. Again, this is going to take a very long time to run just because of the data throughput. 1.2 bytes per second. You can see that Seismic Scan is currently predicting to take 18 years of game time to run. I don't know if that'll actually end up being the case. As experiments complete, it'll clear up bandwidth for other experiments, so it should be less than that, but it might still be a very long time. Lander number 2. Let's try to get you on Midlands. Last one did Highlands. Let's go for Midlands with you. Okay, let's set your parking brake because you're You're kind of slotty. You know what I might want to do? If I just leave gravity scan turned off, is that going to help? Not really. Not really. We're going to leave gravity scan turned off until we complete seismic scan, and maybe in the future we'll remember to come back here and check that again. Last one. You're just a out of control piece of crap now. So I just remembered that I wanted to see what Eve looks like in parallax, and I came back to our Eve lander and, uh, what in the world? Is that an aurora? Is that what's going on? We're floating in the ocean for sure. It's, almost, where are we at? We're down here somewhere. There we are. It's almost sunrise, so why don't we just, time warp forward a little bit. Maybe that's what the sun looks like coming up through Eve's atmosphere. Yeah, apparently. How about that? Okay, so we're floating here, and there's, we're just in the middle of the ocean. I guess we're not going to find out just yet what the surface of Eve looks like. At least not the rocky part, because we're trapped out in the middle of the ocean. At any rate, returning back here to one of our Gilly Landers, I guess we'll call it an episode here. We got we got all of our mission objectives done, right? And we're still going to be transmitting science out of these probes for quite a while. Notice that seismic scan says it's going to take 170 years to finish. Gravity scan, not even running, but I bet it's like 1,000 years or something. Maybe we want to, with some of the science we've unlocked, build a more powerful relay and send out here so that we can not be bottlenecked by transmission rate anymore. We will consider doing that. I don't know about next time, but in some future episode. For now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.